Maybe you still remember the sound of his paws running around the house. Not just any sound. That specific sound. Take rhythmic, familiar. The sound you could recognize even without looking. Paws walking down the hallway. Paws stopping at the bedroom door. Paws slowly approaching while you sat on the couch. And for a long time, this sound was part of your life in such a natural way that you never. He imagined that one day he would just disappear. But it disappeared, and when he left, something strange happened to the house. It wasn't just silence, it was a different kind of silence, a silence that seems to occupy space. Maybe you know this silence, that moment when you get home, open the door, and for a second, your body still expects him to come running, even though I know he won't. Maybe there's still a place in the house that seems too empty. The corner where he slept, the space by the door where he always waited, or that specific spot on the couch that he chose as his own. These little absences keep talking to you, and sometimes, strangely, it seems like they are still alive inside the house. Some people say this is just nostalgia, others say it's memory. But anyone who has ever had a deep bond with a dog knows that there is something difficult to explain. Because certain bonds, they don't seem to end the same way other relationships do. Maybe you've already asked yourself something that few people have the courage to admit. Why, even after so long, does it sometimes still feel like he's around? Maybe in a dream, maybe a strange feeling when you enter an empty room, maybe in that unexpected impulse to look at the place where he used to be. And then a silent question arises that almost no one says out loud. What if some dogs, don't they disappear completely when they leave? What if the bond that existed between you didn't end that day? It may seem like a difficult idea to accept, but there is something even stranger. Over the years, many people began to notice a curious pattern. In some cases, the presence of a dog seems to continue exactly at times when the human needs most, as if he were still there, somehow, accomplishing something that was left unfinished. And that raises a possibility that almost no one considers. Maybe your dog didn't just come back for love. Maybe love is just the most visible part of the story. Because sometimes, when a bond is too deep, the return does not happen just to satisfy the longing. Sometimes, it happens because there is a mission that still needs to be accomplished between you. And when people start to realize this, a question arises almost immediately. A question that can completely change the way you understand the relationship that had with your dog. And that question is simple, but also deeply unsettling. And if that look he gave you, was it never just affection? If you've ever lost a dog, maybe you know exactly what we're talking about now. Because when a dog leaves, it's not just an animal that disappears from the house. It is an entire presence that breaks away from routine. The house remains the same. The walls remain in the same place. The furniture remains in the same place. The door continues to open the same way. But something in the environment changes, and it changes in a way that few people can explain. Maybe there's still a corner of the house that you avoid looking at for a long time. The place where he slept. The bed that stayed there for a few days or weeks because you still didn't have the courage to take it off. Or maybe you put everything away too quickly, just so you wouldn't feel it. But even so, the memory is still there. Because anyone who has lived with a dog knows certain moments that are recorded forever. Very deep way. The way he waited for you at the door. Sometimes it even seemed impossible to explain how he knew exactly what time you was coming. But he knew. Maybe you can still imagine the scene. You opening the gate, or turning the door key, and before you even entered, you could already hear that lively movement on the other side. Paws sliding on the floor. Breathing quickened. The entire body vibrates with joy. As if the most important moment of his day was simply seeing you return. And maybe that's why absence hurts so much. Because a dog doesn't just share space in the house, he follows life. He follows you around the rooms, even when there's no reason to. Go to the kitchen, go to the room, go to the bathroom. And sometimes, he just lays close, without asking for anything, without demanding anything, just standing there. And there is a moment that almost every dog owner knows. That moment when you're going through a difficult day, maybe sitting in silence, and suddenly he notices a look. That silent look, a look that seemed to understand more than many words. Grandmother, have you ever felt this? Like he knew exactly when something wasn't right? As if he was there, not just as an animal, but as a presence that actually cared about how you felt. Maybe that's why the pain of loss can be so confusing. Because it wasn't just a companion who left. It was someone who followed parts of your life that no one else saw. And when this type of bond breaks, something inside us tries to understand what happened. Some people try to move on quickly. Others continue to feel a sense of longing that appears at unexpected times. Sometimes in a song, sometimes on an old photograph, sometimes something very simple, like hearing the sound of another dog's paws on the floor street. And then, for an instant, the heart reacts before the mind, as if he were still there. And it is precisely at this point that many people begin to feel something strange. It's not just nostalgia. It's not just memory. It's a feeling that's difficult to explain. As if the bond hadn't completely disappeared. As if some part of that connection was still active, even after everything, even after parting. Maybe you've already felt this, and never told anyone. Because it seems strange. But let me ask you a very honest question now. If you close your eyes for a moment, and remember your dog, can you feel just absence? Or is there a part within you that, in some silent way, still feels presence? Because when that feeling starts to appear, many people discover something they never thought they would consider. Maybe certain bonds between humans and dogs don't end exactly when we think they end. And this may explain something that happens much more often than people imagine. Something that starts very subtly, so subtle that most people ignore at first, until the day they realize that those little signs, maybe they're not a coincidence at all. A while ago, someone left a comment on a video very similar to this one. It wasn't a long comment, but it was the kind of story that makes us stop for a few seconds before continuing. Reading. The person wrote something simple. She said her dog had left a few months earlier. The house had been silent ever since. The place where he slept still felt strange, as if the space had become larger than it should have been. For weeks, she tried to follow her routine normally: work, home, sleep, to wake up. But there were times when the body reacted on its own. For example, when she got home, even though I knew he wasn't there anymore. The hand still took a second before opening the door, as if some part of her was still waiting for that familiar sound. Paws running across the floor, the body jumping with joy. But what she said next was what caught attention. One night, after a particularly difficult day, she fell asleep on the couch, and in that dream, something happened. She said it was no ordinary dream. It didn't seem far away. He didn't seem confused. It was as if I were actually inside my own home. And then she saw him. His dog was standing in the hallway, the same way I used to be when I wanted to accompany someone to another comfortable. No barking, no running, just looking. That silent look that many dog owners know well. In the dream, she approached, and before she could say anything, he just rested his head on her leg, exactly like he did when he wanted to calm someone down, and at that moment, she started to cry. In the dream itself, because it felt so real, that the feeling was not one of reunion, it was one of continuity. The next morning, she woke up with a strange feeling. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't joy either. It was as if something inside her had rearranged itself, as if that encounter had left a silent message. She ended the comment by saying something curious. She wrote, "I don't know how to explain it, but I felt like he came back just to see if I was okay." When you read something like this for the first time, the most common reaction is to think it was just a dream, the mind trying to deal with the longing. And sometimes, it really is. But there is something that starts to bother you when similar stories appear again, and again, and again. People who report almost identical dreams. People who say they feel a presence at very specific moments. People who find a new dog just as they were entering a very difficult period of life. Coincidence? Perhaps. But here's the point where many people start to feel a little discomfort interior. Because the more reports appear, the more difficult it becomes to ignore a possibility. And this is where we need to do a little attention reset. Because what surprises most about these stories? It's not the fact that someone misses you, not even the fact that someone dreamed about an animal they loved. What really calls at action is when these experiences seem to happen exactly at the moment when the person is about to fall apart emotionally. It's at this point that many people start to ask themselves something they never had before, considered before. What if some dogs, somehow, are they still paying attention to the human they left behind? What if the bond you've built over the years, doesn't it disappear simply because their body is gone? It may seem like a difficult idea to accept, but when we start looking closely at these stories, a hypothesis emerges even more intriguing. Maybe some dogs won't come back just as souvenirs. Maybe they will appear again, in subtle ways. Because there is still something that needs to happen between you. And when that possibility begins to arise, an inevitable question appears soon after. If he really came back somehow, why did you come back? Because maybe. The answer to this question reveals something much deeper than simply longing. There is a curious detail in many of these stories. When people report experiences like this, they rarely happen at random times. They almost always arise when something inside the human is breaking. A difficult phase, a loss, a period of solitude. Or those silent moments in the early morning, where the whole house is quiet, but the mind remains awake. Perhaps you know these moments well, when the body is tired, but memory decides to revisit the past, and it almost always comes back to the same day, the last day. Maybe you still remember, that day when you realized something wasn't right, or the day you had to make an impossible decision, or simply the day she realized he wasn't coming home. For many people, this moment gets stuck inside their memory, and over time, an emotion begins to appear frequently: the guilt. Could I have done something different? Did I realize it too late? Did he suffer? These questions can follow a person for years, because when the bond was true, and this is exactly where something important needs to be said, most people believe that time resolves grief, but this is not completely true. Time silences the mourning on the outside. The routine returns. People continue living, but inside, the bond remains active. And when this bond is not reorganized, the pain doesn't go away. She just changes places. Sometimes it appears in the form of longing, sometimes in the form of a void, sometimes that strange feeling that a part of you was trapped in that day. And this brings us to a very profound possibility. Maybe some dogs don't come back just to satisfy their homesickness. Maybe they will appear again, in subtle ways, because they realize that the human they loved is still trapped in the pain of parting, as if, somehow, they were still trying to take care of you. But there is an important detail here. If the link remains active, it needs to be transformed, because remaining stuck in guilt does not honor the love that existed between you. And that is precisely why so many people feel lost after the loss of a loved one. Dog. They continue to love. But they don't know how to reorganize this love without feeling like they're betraying their memory of him. If this has ever happened to you, pay close attention to what I'm going to say now, because there is a much deeper explanation for this pain that many people carry in silence, and maybe that's exactly why guilt still wakes you up in the middle of the night. Maybe the silence in the house still hurts. Maybe you feel like a part of you was stuck on that day. This is not weakness. This is a bond that has never been reorganized. Time does not reorganize grief. It just silences him on the outside. Inside, he's still active. And until this bond is reorganized, the pain repeats itself. That's exactly why I developed a structured process based on attachment psychology and the neuroscience of grief to help people who have lost their animals to transform this loss without erasing the love. This process is called Eternal Bond Method. It was created to help you dissolve guilt, rearrange the void, understand the feeling of presence, transform love without feeling betrayal. If you feel like you've suffered too long, maybe this is the time to start reorganizing that bond. Access is below, and in this first month, you can use the coupon, Layli. It's not to be forgotten, it's to transform, because when that bond starts to reorganize, something very curious happens. Many people realize that the presence they felt, it was not a call to continue suffering. Maybe it was exactly the opposite. Perhaps it was a silent invitation to understand the true mission that bond he had in his life. And when that mission starts to become clear, the way you understand your dog's feedback can change completely. There is the something that many people only realize long after the loss of a loved one. Dog. At first, everything just seems like pain, longing, silence, memories that arise suddenly. But as time passes, some people start to notice something curious. Certain moments in life seem to have been shaped by the presence of that animal. Maybe you've already thought about this. How your routine changed after he came into your life. How certain difficult phases became more bearable. Because he was there. That companion who followed you around the house. Who would lie down next to you without asking for anything. Who seemed to notice when something wasn't right. And that's precisely when people start to look back. Who notice something that previously went unnoticed. Many dogs enter someone's life at very specific times. Sometimes when a person is experiencing loneliness. Sometimes when you're dealing with a loss. Sometimes when life seems to be silently falling apart. And then that animal appears, small, curious, full of energy, without knowing it. He starts to take up a huge emotional space. But here's the thing that almost no one realizes at first. For many dogs, the bond with humans has never been just coexistence. There is something deeper going on. Something that only becomes clear later. Maybe your dog didn't appear in your life by chance. Maybe he arrived exactly at the moment you needed to learn something, feel something, or survive something. And when we think about it that way, an inevitable question appears. If he came into your life with a purpose, what does it mean when he leaves? Here comes an idea that may seem surprising at first, but more and more people are starting to consider it. Maybe some dogs don't disappear completely after parting. Perhaps the bond that existed between you remains active in some way, not like before, but in a different way, more subtle, quieter. And this is where we need to do another little attention reset, because most people imagine that if an animal could come back, it would come back just out of nostalgia, just because he loved his owner. But when we look closely at certain stories, a very deeper, maybe love is just the gateway. Perhaps the real reason is something else, because there are such strong bonds that seem to continue even after the physical goodbye. And when that happens, many people report something similar. Moments when they feel an unexpected presence. Moments when a dream brings a real feeling of reunion. Times when a new dog appears just when the heart is about to break. Give up on loving again. Coincidence? Perhaps. But there is a phrase that many people end up understanding after experiencing something like this. A phrase that completely changes the way we see the bond with a dog. Pay attention to her. Because maybe it explains something you felt, but never managed to put into practice. Words. There are dogs who do not return to be remembered. Return to finish saving the person you loved. When you look back, you may notice that your dog has already done this once. Maybe he was that being who showed up when you needed him most. The one who brought joy when life was heavy. The one who stayed by your side when no one else understood what you were feeling. And if this has already happened once, perhaps the story did not end completely on that last day. Maybe the bond between you is deeper than it seemed. And maybe, just maybe, the return that some people feel or perceive is not just about love. Maybe it has to do with something that still needs to happen. Something that still needs to be understood. Because when a bond between a human and a dog is truly deep, sometimes love is not the end of the story. Sometimes, he is just the beginning of the mission. When people start to consider this possibility, something inside them changes. Because the question is no longer just, why did he leave? And it becomes something else, a much deeper question. What did this bond do in my life? Maybe you've never thought of it that way. But if you look back calmly, maybe you'll realize that that dog wasn't just a companion. It was a marker of phases in your life. Maybe he was with you in moments when almost no one else was. Maybe he witnessed parts of your story that no one else saw. Difficult days, silent nights, moments when you just needed a presence there. No judgment, no questions. And he was. That's why parting hurts so much. Because when a dog comes deeply into someone's life, it doesn't just take up space in the house. It occupies space in the person's emotional identity. It becomes part of the routine. But here's something that a lot of people only understand after a long time. Continuing to be trapped by guilt, it doesn't keep the bond alive. In fact, keeps the bond locked in at the moment of farewell. And perhaps that's exactly what many dogs wouldn't like to see. If there's one thing any dog owner knows, it's just that they can't bear to see the ones they love suffer. Think about this for a moment. How many times did he notice when you were sad? How many times did he silently approach, as if trying to say, I'm here? Now imagine something. If the bond between you truly continues in some form, do you think he would like to see you trapped in guilt for years? Or would I like to see you transform that love into something that lives on inside you? Perhaps the true mission of many of these bonds is exactly this. Teach something about love, presence, loyalty, and connection. And then leave such a deep mark that this brand continues to guide the person even after parting. But there is an important detail. For this to happen, the bond needs to be reorganized, not erased, not forgotten, reorganized. And this is precisely where many people realize they can't do this alone. Because love continues. But so is the pain. If the guilt still appears, if the silence in the house still weighs heavily, if you feel like a part of your story was frozen on that last day, maybe what you're feeling isn't just longing. Perhaps it is a bond that still needs to be transformed. And if you made it this far in this video, maybe it wasn't by chance. Maybe a part of you is looking for just that, a way to transform love without erasing the memory of it. That's why I created a structured process called Eternal Bond Method. This method was developed using principles of attachment psychology and neuroscience of grief, precisely to help people who have lost their animals reorganize this bond in a healthy and deep way. It helps you dissolve the guilt that insists on returning, reorganize the void left in the routine, understand why sometimes presence still feels real, transform love without feeling like you are betraying your dog's memory. If you feel like you've carried this pain for too long, maybe this is the time to take a different step. Access is available here below, and in this first month you can use the coupon, Laylee. Because this process does not exist to make you forget. It exists to help you understand something very important. When a bond is true, it doesn't finish. He just transforms. And when this transformation happens, many people begin to realize something that previously seemed impossible. The feeling that the love that existed between you was never really lost. Maybe he was just waiting for you to discover the true meaning of the mission that dog had in your life. Maybe now, after everything we've talked about so far, you can look at a specific memory differently. That simple memory, the sound of his paws around the house, the same sound that was once part of your routine. Maybe you can still imagine it. Paws walking down the hallway, the pause at the bedroom door, that little moment when he stopped, just to look at you, as if he was checking if everything was okay. For a long time, perhaps this memory was accompanied only by longing or silence. That strange silence that appears after a dog leaves. A silence that seems longer than it should be. A silence that sometimes makes the house seem different. But perhaps now it is possible to look at this silence in another way, because silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes, silence only means that the form of presence has changed. Think about something for a moment. A dog spends years with someone, observing, following, feeling every emotional change in your human. He learns your rhythm, your habits, your moments of joy, and also your moments of sadness. A bond like this is not a small thing. It is something that deeply marks the story of two lives. That's why, for many people, the feeling that remains after parting is so difficult to explain. It doesn't just feel like a memory. It seems like something more, as if some part of that connection was still alive within them. Maybe you've already felt this, maybe in a dream, maybe in a quiet moment. Maybe that unexpected feeling of comfort when you were going through a day difficult. And when that happens, many people start to notice something curious. The memory of the departed dog does not appear just to cause sadness. Sometimes it appears exactly when a person needs strength. Exactly when you need to remember something important. Loyalty. Presence. Simple love. Love without conditions. Maybe that's why so many people start to consider an idea that before it seemed impossible. That some bonds between humans and dogs do not end completely. They just change shape. And maybe that's exactly why some people feel, at certain times, as if that companion was still somehow taking care of them, not with paws running around the house, not with barking, but with something quieter, with a brand that remains part of their history. Now let me ask you one last question, a question that may have never crossed your mind before. If your dog really had a mission in your life, did this mission end the day he left? Or will part of this mission continue through the way this bond transformed who you became? Perhaps the answer to this is something that each person discovers over time. But there is something that many dog owners come to realize after reflecting on it. All of that. The love that existed between you. It wasn't a chance. It wasn't just coincidence. It was an encounter that left a deep mark. And when a bond leaves that kind of mark, it doesn't just disappear. He continues to live in the little things, in memories, in decisions, in the way you look at other animals, in the way you understand love. So the next time you remember that sound, paws walking around the house, maybe this memory doesn't just have to bring nostalgia. Maybe it can also bring another sensation. The feeling that that bond was never just a chapter that ended. Maybe he was part of something bigger, something that started the day you met, and that maybe, in some silent way, still walking beside you. Because when a dog truly enters someone's life, sometimes he doesn't just come to follow part of the journey. Sometimes he comes to leave a mark that spans much more than a single life. And maybe that's exactly why some people, at certain moments in their lives, they still have the feeling of hearing something familiar. Not exactly a sound, but a living memory. As if, for a very brief moment, the echo of that bond was still passing through the hallway of the house. And if one day you feel something like this, maybe you don't need to be afraid. Maybe it's just a silent reminder of something very simple, that certain bonds, when they are true, never disappear completely.